On Thanksgiving, my parents told me not to come, they needed space. That's the exact text I got while finalizing my travel plans. No explanation, no warmth, just a dismissal masked as quiet time. And the worst part? I wasn't even surprised. For years, I had played the role of the forgotten daughter, the afterthought. While my younger brother basked in their attention and praise, I learned to celebrate my wins in silence. But this time, I didn't feel sad. I didn't cry. Because I had already invited the entire extended family, the ones who actually saw me, celebrated me to a private villa I purchased months ago in the south of France. They thought they were excluding me from Thanksgiving. What they didn't know is that I had already built something far better. This is the story of the Thanksgiving that changed everything, not through revenge, but through something far more powerful: belonging. I read the text again, as if rereading it would somehow change the words. Madelyn, your father and I need a bit of space this year. Evan and his family will be coming, and we just want to keep things small. You understand, right? There was no malice in the message, just detachment, polite distance dressed up as consideration. My fingers hovered over the screen for a moment before I typed a single word: of course. They had no idea what those two words truly meant. You see, I've been the afterthought for most of my life. The independent one, the strong one, the daughter who didn't need attention, so she never got it. Meanwhile, Evan the golden child could sneeze, and our mother would clear her calendar. When I landed my first six-figure job, they said, "That's great," and immediately asked if I was dating anyone. When I bought my New York apartment, they told me how Evan's toddler was starting piano lessons. When I made partner at the firm, they skipped the celebration dinner to attend Evan's father-in-law's birthday barbecue. So no, I wasn't shocked by the text. What they didn't know was that 3 months ago, I'd bought a villa. Not just any villa. A lavender stone estate nestled in the hills of southern France, surrounded by olive groves and overlooking the sea. 7 bedrooms, a sunlit terrace, a gourmet kitchen. I'd spent years working, saving, investing wisely, and this was the gift I gave myself. And I wasn't going to enjoy it alone. That same day I closed on the property, I sent a very different message to Aunt Laura and Uncle Greg. They were the first to RSVP, yes. Then came Cousin Bennett and his wife, who called me crying happy tears, saying they'd long felt edged out too. One by one, the names poured in. Uncles, aunts, cousins, their kids. 21 confirmed within a week. 23, now. People who had shown up for me when my parents didn't. Aunt Laura, who flew to New York just to sit in the front row at my law school graduation. Uncle Greg, who helped me negotiate my first contract. Cousins who remembered my birthday, who called when I made the Forbes list last year. They were never my immediate family, but they were my family. And this year, I was hosting them all. Not in some quiet act of defiance, but in something far more powerful. Joy, reclamation, proof that I didn't need to chase after love that was conditional when I had love that was freely, fully given. So when I looked at that message from my mother, the one asking me not to come, I smiled. She thought she was excluding me, but I'd already moved on, and I was about to show her just how much she'd missed. I've always believed that family is less about blood and more about who shows up. And this time, I was building something no one could take away: a new kind of Thanksgiving. One that didn't require permission. One that wasn't conditional on anyone else's approval or availability. One that belonged entirely to us. Planning it wasn't about outshining anyone. It was about finally stepping into the space I'd always been denied. The villa became my canvas. I hired a local chef, Antoine, whose roasted duck had made headlines in a regional travel magazine. I booked a private vineyard tour for Friday afternoon, and a cooking class the next morning taught by a warm, sharp-tongued woman named Beatrice who didn't tolerate half-stirred sauces. There'd be a lavender-scented dinner on the terrace beneath string lights, long lunches under the olive trees, and lazy breakfasts with freshly baked croissants and the sound of laughter echoing through the halls. Every room in the villa was named after a region of France. I had place cards printed for each guest, matching linens to floral themes. I even hired a professional photographer, not just to take pictures, but to document the joy that had always been missing from my Thanksgivings. I sent each guest a welcome package, an itinerary, travel guides, a handwritten note, and a tiny bottle of French olive oil from the region. And for the children, personalized adventure books in English and French. People started texting me things like, "We've never looked forward to Thanksgiving this much," and "It feels like coming home." And you know what? That's exactly what I wanted. This wasn't just about filling a house. It was about building a legacy. Back in the States, my parents had no idea. As far as they knew, I was spending Thanksgiving alone in my apartment, probably working. That's always how they framed me, career-driven, busy, emotionally distant. It never occurred to them that I might be quietly building something warmer, more meaningful, more deeply connected than anything they'd created in their curated little family circle. And Evan? I'm sure he assumed I'd text him some passive-aggressive emoji on Thanksgiving morning and that would be the end of it. Let them think that. I didn't need to correct their version of me. I didn't need to argue or explain. I was done fighting to be seen. This time, I'd let the photos speak for themselves. The joy, the laughter. The kind of celebration that doesn't just happen because it's a holiday, but because people choose to be there. People choose you. That was the Thanksgiving I was building. And no one could uninvite me from that. The morning sun filtered through the olive trees, casting long golden shadows across the stone driveway. I had barely finished setting out the welcome drinks when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. They were here. I walked down the front steps, heart racing, not from nerves, but from something I hadn't felt around family in years. Anticipation. Aunt Laura's door flung open first. She stepped out wearing a straw hat and oversized sunglasses, her arms already open before I could say a word. "Oh, honey," she said, pulling me into a hug that smelled like lavender and home. "You did this." Behind her came Uncle Greg, grinning as he surveyed the villa's stone facade and the sea shimmering in the distance. "Not bad, kiddo," he said, slapping my shoulder. "You might just be the only Ross with actual taste." I laughed, really laughed for the first time in what felt like months. They weren't just early, they were eager. Within the next few hours, the rest began to arrive. Cousin Bennett and his wife Sarah, dragging two sleepy kids who came alive the moment they saw the pool. Uncle Darius and Aunt Mona with a trunk full of wine they'd insisted on bringing, just in case French wine didn't cut it. Cousins Alina and Josh arrived from London, having made it a weekend escape. Every arrival felt like a puzzle piece clicking into place. I watched as people explored the villa like children set loose in a storybook, marveling at the tile work, claiming rooms with delight, gasping at the terrace views. Luggage was abandoned in favor of laughter. Conversations sprang up like flowers about travel, food, work, memories, none of them forced, none of them shallow. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low, we gathered for a welcome dinner on the terrace. The chef prepared a rustic Provençal spread, roast chicken with lemon and herbs, truffle potatoes, grilled vegetables, and fresh bread still warm from the village bakery. I poured the wine myself, moving from seat to seat, listening to stories, catching up on lives that had always stayed connected to mine even when my own parents hadn't noticed. When everyone had settled, I raised my glass. "To family," I said, voice steady. "The kind that shows up, the kind that doesn't need blood to know where they belong." Glasses clinked, and for the first time in years, I felt seen not for what I'd accomplished, not as a comparison to someone else, but simply as me. We lingered out there for hours, wrapped in blankets and fairy lights, sipping wine and telling stories under the stars. No one checked their phones. No one looked anxious to leave. This wasn't a gathering. It was a homecoming. And Thanksgiving hadn't even started yet. I woke up to the scent of freshly baked croissants drifting up the stairwell, mixed with the distant sound of children's laughter echoing through the courtyard. Thanksgiving morning had arrived. I slipped out onto the balcony in my robe, coffee in hand, and took in the view. The Mediterranean glowing soft blue beneath the morning sun, olive trees swaying in the breeze, and below me, my cousins' kids racing each other across the stone garden paths. Inside, someone was already putting on music, something jazzy and light. The villa was alive. Downstairs, Aunt Laura and Sarah were arranging flowers on the long outdoor table. Uncle Greg was giving one of the teenagers a crash course in espresso making. There was laughter, movement, connection. It felt like family, the real kind. Then my phone buzzed. "Mom, happy Thanksgiving. Just wanted to check if you're doing okay by yourself. If you get lonely, we could FaceTime later." I almost laughed. The idea that I might be sitting alone in my apartment, microwaving, stuffing, and fighting back tears, that's the version of me they always pictured. The one who accepted scraps and smiled politely. I stared at the message, then glanced out the window. Chef Antoine had just arrived and was already in the kitchen directing staff. The turkey was being prepped, sides were being chopped, desserts laid out. Meanwhile, Cousin Bennett and his wife were helping their youngest son color place cards by the fire. Evan's face wasn't anywhere in this picture. I replied simply, "Thanks, but I'm quite busy actually. Enjoy your quiet celebration." I even added a smiley face, not out of pettiness, but out of peace. I meant it. A few minutes later, my phone rang. Mom again. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity won. "Hi, Mom." "Oh, Maddie, you sound cheerful." "I am." "Are you working today?" I just assumed. "Nope. Hosting." There was a pause. I could practically hear her confusion through the line. "Hosting? Where exactly are you?" I stepped out onto the balcony again, letting the background noise speak for itself, the kids shouting, the chef calling out in French, the sound of clinking glasses as table settings were finalized. "In the south of France," I said. "I bought a villa here a few months ago." Silence. "You bought a villa?" I kept my tone light. "Yes, it's beautiful. Sea views, olive trees, chef, prepared meals. Very peaceful, well, peaceful in a joyful way." "And you're hosting who?" "Oh," I said casually, "Aunt Laura and Uncle Greg, the Bennetts, Darius and Mona, Josh, Alina, the kids, most of the family really, 23 of us all together." Another beat of silence. "They've been here all week," I added. "Wine tastings, cooking classes, sunset dinners. It's been lovely." She didn't respond right away. But I could feel it, the unraveling. The realization. Not just that I was doing fine without them, but that everyone else had chosen to be here instead. "We just thought you'd be alone," she finally whispered. I smiled to myself. "You were mistaken." And with that, I ended the call gently, but finally. Because the truth was, I'd never felt less alone in my life. The call from my mother had barely ended when my phone lit up again this time. It was Evan. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering. Part of me considered declining, but a sharper part, the one that had spent a lifetime swallowing back words, wanted to hear what he'd say now that the balance had shifted. I picked up. "Madelyn?" His voice was strained. "Where are you?" "France," I said plainly. "With the family." "You're what?" "Everyone's been asking why no one's at Mom and Dad's house. Cousin Mona posted a picture of the villa on Facebook. And Aunt Laura uploaded a whole album. A Thanksgiving to remember. You couldn't even give us a heads up?" I took a breath. "You mean like the barbecue you had in June? Or the twins' birthday party? Or the summer lake trip you planned and forgot to invite me to?" "That's different." "No," I cut in calmly. "It's not. You created a world I wasn't part of. I just stopped knocking on the door." He was quiet for a long second. "Mom's freaking out. She's getting texts from her church friends, from Dad's golf buddies, asking why they're not in France, why they didn't post anything this year." I didn't mean to embarrass anyone, I said, and it was mostly true. I just wanted one holiday where I didn't feel like an afterthought. He didn't argue. Instead, he sighed and in a rare flash of honesty said, "Thanksgiving here is kind of a mess. The kids are cranky, Dad's been asleep since noon, and Mom's been pacing with her phone all day. It's weird without the family." "It always was," I said. "You just never noticed." After we hung up, I set my phone face down and walked toward the courtyard, where sunlight streamed between the stone columns and Aunt Mona was teaching the younger kids how to fold napkins into swans. From the kitchen came the clatter of pans and the warm, spicy smell of sage and butter. All of this was what real family felt like. Then Dad called. I nearly didn't answer, but something told me to. "Princess," he began, using the soft voice he reserved for smoothing things over. "Your mother and I have been talking." "About?" "Well," he hesitated. "We think maybe we should have handled things differently." I waited. "You know your mom, she just wanted a calm holiday this year. The twins have been fussy. The house has been hectic. We weren't trying to exclude you. We just thought." "You thought I'd be fine being left out, again." Silence. "I've been fine a lot, Dad. When you skipped my law school graduation to go to Evan's rehearsal dinner, when I got promoted and you said, 'That's nice,' before pivoting to his latest real estate project. Every time you called me strong like it was an excuse to never show up." "That's not fair," he said, but the words lacked conviction. "No. What's not fair is that it took 23 people flying across an ocean to remind me that I've always had a family, just not the one I kept trying to win over." I could hear voices behind me now, calling for group photos. The table was set, candles flickering against soft daylight. I pictured Chef Antoine standing proudly beside his masterpiece of a turkey, Cousins arranging chairs, the sound of glasses being polished. "I need to go," I said softly. "The photographer's here. Lunch is about to be served." He didn't stop me. Maybe he knew he couldn't. Maybe, for once, he heard the finality in my voice. "Enjoy your space, Dad," I said, echoing the words from their message. "It's what you asked for." Then I hung up. As I turned, Aunt Laura stood in the doorway, watching me with quiet pride. "Let me guess," she said. "They finally realized what they gave up." I didn't have to answer. The look on my face said it all. She smiled and offered me her arm. "Come on. The turkey's getting cold, and your uncle just opened that ridiculous bottle of Burgundy he's been saving for 5 years." I took her arm, feeling the kind of warmth I'd spent so long chasing in all the wrong places. This wasn't just Thanksgiving. It was the turning point. The moment I stopped asking to belong and built a place where I already did. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of espresso and warm cinnamon drifting up from the kitchen and to a phone that had practically exploded overnight. The photographer had delivered the first batch of edited photos just after midnight, and true to my cousin's promise, they'd wasted no time. Aunt Laura posted an album titled A Thanksgiving to Remember, filled with photos of candlelit dinners under the stars, children playing in the Olive Garden, hand-lettered place cards, and long, laughing toasts beside glowing fire pits. Her caption was simple: "When you choose joy, you create belonging. Thank you, Madelyn, for reminding us what family celebration really feels like." And then it happened. The photos started to spread not just among the family, but through their social circles. My cousins tagged friends, who commented things like, "This looks like a movie," and "I didn't know your family was in France for the holidays, stunning." But the ones I noticed most were the names I recognized. From my hometown. From my parents' world. Country club acquaintances. My mother's friends from the church circle. My dad's golfing buddy's wife. Comments trickled in. "Catherine, I had no idea you were in France. Wait, where are you? Robert, how did we miss this invite? This is your family? It's beautiful." Only, they weren't there. And it was obvious. The realization must have landed slowly like fog lifting, but once it did, the shift was unmistakable. People started asking questions. Quietly, politely. But the subtext was clear. Why weren't you included? Why weren't you invited? Why does your daughter seem to be the center of something you clearly weren't part of? Around noon, Evan called again. I let it go to voicemail. Then my phone buzzed with something unexpected. A notification that my mother had shared Aunt Laura's album on Facebook and tagged me. No caption, no comment, just tagged. I almost felt bad. Almost. Then came the text. "We didn't realize everyone was going. Why didn't you tell us?" I stared at it, thumb hovering. "Because you never asked. Because you never saw me unless I was convenient. Because you told me not to come and meant it until you realized the world had been invited without you." Instead of replying, I slid my phone into my bag and headed down to the courtyard, where my cousins were setting up for a vineyard picnic. Aunt Mona was loading a wicker basket with cheeses and bread, while the kids played tag between rows of rosemary bushes. Later that day, I posted one single photo. A wide shot from the night before, our long table glowing with soft lights, faces turned toward each other in mid-laughter, the sea just visible in the background. I added a single line. "Turns out the best traditions are the ones you build yourself." No tags. No explanations. But by then, I knew I didn't need to explain anything. The pictures and the absence of certain people in them said it all. By Sunday morning, the villa felt like something out of a travel magazine. Aunt Mona was orchestrating a breakfast buffet with homemade preserves and lavender scones. Uncle Darius had somehow become the de facto tour guide, planning a visit to the nearby hilltop market. Meanwhile, the kids had formed their own villa club, complete with matching scarves made from leftover table runners. It wasn't chaos. It was harmony, the kind that only happens when everyone wants to be there. And then came the text from Mom. "About Christmas, your father and I have been thinking, maybe we should coordinate plans this time." I didn't respond. Not out of cruelty, but because I no longer felt obligated to fill their silence with effort. For the first time, I wasn't performing for a seat at their table. I'd built my own longer, wider, surrounded by people who pulled out chairs for each other without keeping score. I stepped outside, where Aunt Laura was sipping coffee on the terrace wrapped in a wool shawl. "Another message from Catherine?" she asked gently. I nodded. "They want to talk about Christmas." She smirked. That might be hard. I smiled back. Christmas is already planned. Her eyebrows lifted. Oh? I've rented a chalet in the Swiss Alps. Fireplace, snow-covered balconies, sleigh rides, the works. Laura let out a delighted laugh. You little genius. You're starting a whole new holiday tradition, aren't you? I think it's time. Because once you've experienced what true belonging feels like, the unforced kind, the warm kind, the quietly certain kind, you don't go back to negotiating crumbs. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't even about proving a point. It was about setting a new standard for myself. And maybe for everyone else, too. Later that evening, we sat beneath the string lights for one last family dinner. The kids read aloud thank you notes they'd written on hand-cut paper leaves. My cousin Alina gave a toast that made us all tear up. To Maddie for not only hosting the most beautiful Thanksgiving we've ever had, but for showing us that family is a choice. And we choose you. Every time. I couldn't speak for a moment. So I just raised my glass and whispered, to next year, and every year after. There was no sadness when we began to pack the next day, only the quiet assurance that this wasn't the end of something, but the beginning. The beginning of holidays that would no longer revolve around obligation or guilt, but around joy, intention, and shared history we were creating for ourselves. As each car pulled away, I waved with my heart full. Not everyone would understand what we had created here. Not everyone had to. But for those of us who showed up, who stayed, laughed, listened, and chose one another, this wasn't just a better Thanksgiving. It was a better way of being family. The morning after everyone left, the villa was quiet again, but not empty. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, warming the terracotta tiles under my bare feet. I wandered slowly from room to room, still able to hear laughter echoing faintly in the corners, like the house hadn't quite let go of what it had witnessed. I stepped out onto the terrace with a mug of coffee, pulling my cardigan tight as a gentle breeze rolled off the sea. The table was cleared, the lanterns had been taken down, but the view was unchanged. Calm, certain, expansive. That's when my phone buzzed again. Mom. Honey, about Christmas. I didn't open the message, not because I was angry, but because I no longer needed to answer. Let them wonder. Let them sit in the silence they once handed me without blinking. Let them, for once, feel what it's like to be on the outside looking in, not out of vengeance, but for balance. Because sometimes, the only way people learn the cost of exclusion is to feel it. Not through confrontation. Not through harsh words. But through absence. I glanced at the pine wreath still hanging by the kitchen entrance. A quiet reminder that the holidays were only just beginning, and this year, I'd be spending Christmas in the Swiss Alps with the same people who chose to spend Thanksgiving with me. People who showed up. People who brought joy, not judgment, wholeness, not guilt. I opened the photo gallery on my phone and flipped through the week in reverse, the night we danced under fairy lights, the vineyard picnic, the kids falling asleep on the couch in a tangle of blankets, the sun setting behind a long table of toasts and shared stories. Every image radiated something I'd rarely seen in old family albums: belonging. Not performance, not forced cheer, just joy. Genuine, wild, grateful joy. And I realized that was the real victory. Not that they regretted excluding me, but that I no longer needed their permission to feel included. That I had built something bigger, deeper, and more lasting than any single holiday could contain. This wasn't the end of a chapter. It was the start of a new book. A life where I no longer asked, "Do I matter?" A life where the answer was already in the room, laughing, eating, toasting beside me. I took one last look at the Mediterranean horizon, then walked back inside, closing the terrace doors gently behind me. Christmas was calling. And this time, no one would have to ask if they were wanted. They already knew.